well, good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us for the Platte River Power Authority Renewable Energy Update. My name is Pete Everly, and I'm with the Northern Chapter of the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, better known as NCRES. For those of you who are new, NCRES and its local chapters provide education, policy advocacy, and community engagement that accelerate the adoption of all forms of renewable energy, energy efficiency, high performance building, energy storage, and emerging technologies that will help Colorado achieve 100% renewable energy. NCRES is a statewide, nonpartisan 501c3 organization that is supported by our sustaining individual and business members, as well as donations from the community. I want to give special thanks to our Northern Colorado business partners, which include Sandbox Solar, Solaris Energy, Benchmark Electrical Solutions, Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association, and Platte River Power Authority. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker for tonight, Masood Ahmad. Masood is the Resource Planning Manager with Platte River Power Authority. His responsibilities include planning for the implementation of PRPA's Resource Diversification Policy. This policy calls for the supply of 100% non-carbon, financially sustainable, environmentally responsible, and reliable electricity by 2030. Masood holds a PhD from Georgia Institute of Technology and has over 2 decades of global experience in the electric power sector. Prior to joining Platte River, he worked with 2 large southeastern utilities, Virginia Power and the Southern Company. His overseas experience includes working in the energy sectors of Saudi Arabia, Brazil, the United Kingdom, Turkey, and Pakistan. As a student and practitioner of the energy business, Masood is excited to be part of the current energy transition. Assisting Masood in the question and answer will be Pat Connors. Pat has over 30 years of experience in the utility industry in the areas of power supply, resource planning, and market operations. Pat joined Platte River in 2017 as Vice President of Power Supply and leads Platte River Power Authority's supply planning, power markets, and generation dispatch. He's also responsible for developing Platte River's resource plans for serving existing member load and future load growth, power purchase agreements, and new resource acquisition, including renewable resources and utility scale batteries. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to Masood.
Well, thank you for a kind introduction, Pete, and I'm really excited to be presenting our plans at this very engaged and interesting forum. This is the work we are doing is very timely, and members of this forum will find it interesting. So it's a pretty dense presentation, so I'll just get going. So those of you who may not know us well, Platte River Power Authority is a community-owned, nonprofit public power utility that serves the 4 cities in northern Colorado. Our governance structure includes the mayors and the senior management of these 4 cities kind of set our policy and govern us. We are roughly 1/10 the size of Excel Colorado or Piesco. This year we expected a peak demand of 655 megawatts. Actual was 700. Since I do the forecasting, so I have to defend it. Basically, we forecast on average weather, and we were not expecting such a high economic activity and recovery from COVID. So the actual demand came much higher than the forecast, and also forecasting a peak hour out of 8760 hours is a challenge that we deal with. But on an annual basis, we usually supply about a little close to 5 million megawatt hours to our communities and to other neighboring utilities, and our communities have about 165,000 customers that we serve. We have a pretty interesting topics to cover. We talk about Platte River's 2020 IRP first. Then we talk about what is happening in the regional market development, and which is a key to operate in a deeply decarbonized world. And we talk about DER strategy. DER, distributed energy resources, are expected to play a very important role in the future. And so we recently concluded our strategy. So I'll talk about that. And we talk about a little bit wind and solar generation. And more importantly, at the end, we will conclude what is on our to-do list what are we doing to planning to do in the next couple of years towards renewable. So starting with the IRP, the work on IRP started in really December 2018. We worked through all 2019 and then presented our first run to the board in February of 2020, and then work was halted because of COVID, and then we picked up in September and completed in October. So the foundation of our IRP was a resource diversification policy that was passed by our board in 2018. This policy calls for Platte River to work towards a 100% non-carbon supply mix by 2030, as Pete alluded in the beginning. And why, in order to, while we are supplying 100% non-carbon supply, we have to also respect the three pillars of reliability, environmental responsibility, and financial sustainability. The board also realized that it's a very lofty challenge having 100% non-carbon supply, especially in 2018. So the board said there will be many technological developments have to take place. There are 9 caveats that they gave us that things have to improve, which is there has to be a regional market, battery performance has to improve, storage has to, which is the key towards a renewable future, has to improve, better T&D integration, and more management and control and engagement of the customer. So all those caveats were the foundation, kind of lay the ground rules for us to move forward. Since the passage of the resource diversification policy in 2018, we have made a lot of progress. The chart here shows our renewable energy generation from 2018. The lower bar is hydro energy that we always had. So it's kind of steady, but we had 317 gigawatt hours of wind and solar in 2018. And with the plans we have already committed, we'll get to 1.4 million almost by 2024. This is almost 4 times increase in such a short period of time. So we are already working towards implementing the resource diversification policy. And that was the foundation of IRP, also like what will happen after 2024 through 2030 and even beyond. So the IRP was a 20-year plan starting 2021. We developed 4 portfolios. First, P1, portfolio 1 was a continuity, like a business as usual, as if we always made economic decisions, no policy related decision, just basic economics. And second portfolio, we say, okay, what if we retire all the coal units by the end of 2029? And P3 was zero carbon, where we retire all of our fossil generation by the end of 2029. And P4 was integrated utilities, which really is another way of saying, what if the drivers of this current energy transition happen at a much faster pace than we expect? So with those 4 portfolios, we developed related expansion plan, the cost, and CO2 emission, and we'll quickly go through those some of those things. So first thing is the portfolio expansion. What type of generation mix we will have in 2030 and beyond. So this chart shows from 2021 through 2040 our capacity, generation capacity. So the top line is CTs, peaking capacity, gas-fired. We have 388 megawatt of those. They continue through the planning horizon. We own Craig 1 and 2 coal units. They retire by 2028. We still get hydro from WAPA. Rawhide 1, which is our main coal plant, is retired in 2029. And then in blue is what we, in red is what we build new generation for. So we build 104 megawatt of RICE, which is really big diesel engines, 6 of them adding at 204 megawatts. Then we add another 300 megawatt of solar, 300 megawatt of battery, and 200 megawatt of wind. So really, we retire roughly 278 plus 151, a little over 430 megawatt of coal, and replace it with 900 megawatt of wind, solar, and battery storage, and 1 peaking unit. So that's the P2 expansion plan. where we retire coal. In P3, where we retire all of our thermal resources, we have replaced with a large amount of solar, 750 megawatt in 2030, as you can see in red, 2,400 megawatts of battery storage, and 550 megawatt of wind. So retiring the 388 megawatt of batteries and not building the backup gas-fired RICE units, we have to build a large amount of renewable and a large amount of storage. So just to put in perspective, in 2030, we expect the peak load to be around 750 megawatts. So, so we'll have roughly 900 megawatt of solar, 900 megawatt of wind, and 2,400 megawatts of battery. So large amount of capacity to meet a 700 peak megawatt, 750 megawatt peak. And especially like in spring and fall, when the load is mild and there is plenty of wind and solar, that means there is a large amount of excess energy that we would have in this portfolio. And to see how this portfolio behaved in terms, the four portfolios behaved in terms of cost, this chart shows our annual operating cost, or variable cost we call them. Right now, it's about $100 million a year. That's our cost of fuel and paying for the PPA payments to renewable suppliers and for hydro. And it goes up kind of at inflation, a little bit higher than inflation through 2030, reaches 140 million dollars by 2029. And then the four portfolios split. Portfolios 1 and 4 kind of stay steady. You can see the green and blue lines, green and yellow lines. And portfolio 2, which is dark blue line, kind of is there's a little uptick because that's where we build the RICE and a lot of renewable, about 600 megawatt of renewable and 300 megawatt of battery. And then the portfolio 3, where we build a large amount of renewable and large amount of battery storage, that is almost 3 times the cost of the other 2 portfolios. So that shows the economics of going 100% renewable based on today's technology and based on what we know today and based on today's projection is very, very expensive. And later on, I'll show you its reliability is also questionable. So in terms of CO2, I'm ignoring portfolios 1 and 3. Portfolio 2 gets us to 90% plus reduction in 2030, CO2 reduction in 2030 relative to 2005 actuals. That's like 93, 94% reduction. And then, of course, portfolio 3 is 100% reduction. And now there is a law in Colorado that you may be familiar with, which requires all the utilities to reduce their CO2 emissions by more than 80% in 2030. So these 2 portfolios meet the CO2 requirements, but based on what you saw in the cost and the reliability pictures I'll show you in a second, a board adopted P2, and that's our working plan right now. Excuse me. This chart shows like the issue of reliability. Basically what we do in a deeply decarbonized world, we need a lot of storage, not hours, days and weeks at a time. And the reason is the left chart shows what happened in February 2021. You probably remember Valentine's Day was a very, very cold 4 or 5 days. So the top line is our load. It's varying between 3 to 150 to 500 megawatts. And the blue line is wind. You can see pretty much there is no wind. It kind of drops off completely. And the lower line is solar. So for almost 3 days, we didn't have 3.5 days, we didn't have any solar or wind. So if we go to 100% non-carbon, that means during this time, we have to have battery storage. And the 2,400 megawatts you saw before is roughly 1 day of storage for an average day. So after 1 day, either you have to rely on others or do, kind of shut down your customers if you don't have thermal backup. So the chart on the right is taken from PSCO's IRP that they filed in September and this March. It shows that, this is October 2015. They had a pretty decent amount of load, about 5,000 megawatts, but as you can see, for almost 4 days, there's absolutely no wind and solar. So for reliability in a deeply decarbonized world, you do need either thermal backup or storage, which extends days and days and weeks. And that is not available right now. And there are a lot of promising technologies, but the lithium-ion batteries that we use today, it provides a sweet spot for that is 4-hour storage, not 4 days or 4-week-long storage. So that kind of summarized our work for the IRP. And like I said before, we're working on portfolio 2, which we think is reasonable in cost, does a lot of reduction in CO2, and provides us backup in times like this, which we will expect certainly happen in the future. Now I move to the second topic of discussion, which is the regional market participation. So we decided to join WEEM. WEEM stands for a Western Energy Imbalance Market, which is a real-time market where you enter the hour, balance your supply and demand, and within the hour, if there are changes, the market operator kind of balances resources from the lowest cost. So we had the option to join WEEM, which is part of California ISO, or we had the option to join WEES, which stands for Western Energy Imbalance Services, which is Eastern Market SPP, Southern Power Pool, Southeastern SPP is a large market to the east of us. We decided to join WEEM because it's a no regret decision. The exit fees are not there. And then we also did a study actually through Brattle, which is a consulting company, which gives us the cost benefit of the two options, and WEEM was a better option, and that's what we joined along with other utilities in the state. Since joining WEEM last year, a few things have happened. Colorado Spring has decided to pull out of WEEM, and they're joining WEES, and Tri-State has already moved its load from PSCO, and it's part of the WEES market already. And based on this, PSCO is saying kind of they have delayed joining WEEM, and so right now we are working closely with PSCO. We are in their balancing area, and we are also looking at all of our options, as I will show here. So our options are short-term participate in the WEEM as we had planned, and because it's a no regret decision, there is not a huge cost, or join WEES and move our load into WAPA's balancing area. Then long-term, we could join, SPP has already announced that they will extend RTO, Regional Transmission Organization, which is a real full-fledged market in this area in the next 2-3 years, and join it. Or if there is a new state level RTO or Mountain West RTO that has been talked about comes to fruition. So join a full-fledged RTO. The reason in a deeply decarbonized world we need an RTO so that we can access wider weather variations. When it's not so sunny here, it's most likely sunny in California or windy in Arkansas. So we need to be able to access wider areas in when we shut down our thermal resources, which are dispatchable. The next I'm sorry, I'm running quickly, so you can please do log in your questions, and we'd be happy to answer at the time after we finish. The third topic is the DER strategy that we recently completed, working with our many stakeholders and presented to the board. So I'm going to quickly run through that. DER stands for Distributed Energy Resources. The reason for doing the DER strategy was really because our customers wanted it. They were very keen. We heard a lot from them that they want to have more customer side resources be part of the resource diversification policy and our supply mix. So, and our owner communities, the 4 distribution companies, they want that, and they already have a lot of programs in the process. So the like I said before, resource diversification policy also says that DERs will play a key role in the deeply decarbonized future. So Uh, the, Based on these drivers, we work with a third-party consultant, SEPA, and came up with the strategy that we just presented to the board, and we are now ready to implement. Um, the key things of the strategy was the vision was to integrate, I'm going to read it, DERs into the electric system through collaboration and coordination between the owner communities and Platte River to provide value to all customers. So the key word is collaboration and coordination with customers and with the owner communities and bringing value to all customers. So those were the main kind of the driving uh, forces for our strategy, and they are the main findings also, that we have to work together where we benefit everyone. The guiding principles were for the strategy, DER strategy, are it has to enhance reliability, financial sustainability, and customer experience. Also, safety is an important part as we move the customer who was a consumer of electricity becomes a provider or storer of electricity. The safety becomes a little bit bigger challenge, and so that's the key. We want to make sure the safety is in all aspects of our planning and customer programs, planning and operations. And another thing is the physical and cyber security, because now the asset sitting on the customer side of the meter will become part of the supply mix, just like our generating units. So we'll be interacting with the customer, and customers load will be supply resources will be interacting with our system. So cybersecurity is the key. Then the next one is a consistency, transparency, and flexibility among the communities as well as the customers. We have across all of our footprint, we want the same programs. Transparency, whatever our policies are, it's visible to customer. There are no surprises. And however we implement the strategy, we follow a flexible path because the technologies are really evolving, the systems and processes are emerging, and we don't want to lock ourselves with the heavy investment. We want to be flexible and nimble so that as the technology evolves, we are able to change. And also the common processes and economies of scale, and just follow the best practices. And being a small entity, we don't want to do a lot of research and development part. We want to implement the best practices where other utilities have already kind of things have been proven to some extent. So what DERs we consider? Distributed generation is one of them, which is a lot of our customers have solar on their rooftop solar, and right now it's sitting as a resource which we don't interact with. But as part of DERs, we want to be able to interact with it, know how much solar is coming on the customers, um, uh, and also be able to control if we need in certain times of reliability. Energy efficiency is a very important DER. We and all communities are working on we have a very proven energy efficiency program, and we want to continue build on the success for that. Beneficial electrification is in a new and emerging area that includes transportation as well as home electric heating, home cooking, and other uses where the electricity is starting to replace natural gas for heating and cooking purposes. That's an emerging area. We want to use that increase in load in a way that it benefits. It's not a burden, rather it's a asset to us as well as, of course, to our customers. Demand response programs are the programs where the customer has the flexibility, where we can change the timing of the load. Suppose we have certain hours when there is plenty of renewables and plenty of wind, we have excess generation, we want the customers load to be higher. If they have a dryer that we can control or something else, or we want to run those loads. and when there is a minimal renewable energy, we want to control some of the optional load. So whatever flexibility that the customer has, we want to leverage that to complement the intermittency of the renewables. That becomes an asset for us. That means we have to have lesser backup. And finally, distributed energy storage. It's an emerging area. A lot of our customers have interest in it. Technology is evolving very fast. And so we want to be able to interact with the storage at the customer level. And of course, we share the cost with them, and we take the advantage of the storage when the system needs it. So those are the DERs that we are considering. Of course, there are many more, and many more are coming, but these are kind of the basic known these days today. I'm going to skip this slide. Basically, the goal of the strategy is to work together and do the programs that benefit the whole system. And this slide kind of puts everything in one page. One place is we have vision and the guiding principles of the strategy, that, and also the best practices that leads into our framework tool. This tool has two sides of it: the qualitative analysis as well as quantitative work. So we want to make sure the programs and the practices we start, they meet the criteria that we laid out in our vision and guiding principles. And then we work at the three levels. In the planning, we work with the customers as well as our communities. Then we design the programs, and then programs are designed and marketed and implemented and then operated with all benefit to all key thing in mind. So that's our framework. And then that will, once these three boxes are working in tandem and considering the guiding principles that we laid out, our board approved, I think then the integration solutions that will come definitely will meet the requirements of the strategy. So that's kind of on the DER strategy. So now I want to show you what you already know, the intermittency of renewables and wind and solar resources. There are a couple of charts I want to show you, which shows the challenges in the wind forecasting. The chart on the left side shows the data from March 3 to 5 this year. The blue line shows the actual wind, and the blue line shows the forecast, and the green line shows the actuals. And you can see there's first few hours our forecast was reasonable, but then there was a wide gap. The actual came way lower. The chart on the right shows the opposite, where the actual came way higher. Obviously, forecasting weather is a challenge, and on hour by hour, minute by minute basis, it's very complex, and we need either thermal. Currently, we use thermal resources to balance and complement this intermittency of renewables and wind, and in the future, we will need to use the battery resources. And here is another kind of a chart that shows this is a forecast for our wind from two very reputable resources. The chart, the scale here is hour. So first hour, we have two sources. One source is saying wind could expected to be 100 megawatt, and there is a wide range. It could be 60 megawatt or 140 megawatt. And the second source is saying wind could be 220, but could be as low as 180. So you can see the forecast would differ so much. That's the next hour, then they converge, and later on they diverge. So we are used to meeting our load, which changes every second when customers switch on and off their appliances. The load changes every second, and generation used to follow the load. That's how we designed thermal generation or hydro generation. But in case of renewables, they are not dispatchable, they are not controllable, they are intermittent, they change the output. Now we need newer technologies to follow the load that is changing and the demand that is changing every second and every second millisecond, and it has to be balanced in real time. from currently we are doing with our existing thermal resources, but once we retire them, we would need other means, mostly battery or some kind of electricity storage technology. And this chart is kind of the same thing, building on the challenges of forecast. And the blue line is a nice forecast, kind of normal distribution type shape for solar on a particular day. And then green line shows how actually it happened. And you can see that, we were expecting some clouds normally distributed kind of shaded area, but in the morning, the clouds disappeared completely and the generation was much more than we expected early hours. But in the afternoon, thicker clouds came and really covered, and almost the renewable went to zero. So those are the challenges of intermittency that our systems and future supply systems have to meet. So that's kind of some of the bigger things we are working on. Here are the specific things which is on our to-do list. The first thing is as you I'm sure you know, we signed a power purchase agreement with the Black Hollow Solar for 150 megawatts. That's a very important project for us, addition to our renewable portfolio. Our focus is to complete that on time, have it online by 2024. Now we are learning through this process that renewables we need sooner than later, and so we might do another solicitation for solar as well as battery, or both or at least battery, because we believe although battery is expensive today, but we do need a lot of experience in operating, and so we might get some storage installed on our system sooner than later. And of course, we talked about the DER strategy. We want to make sure we leverage what our customers and our distribution companies are doing in the DER space, and kind of start implementing it through in a coordinated and collaborative fashion as the strategy calls for. And the final thing that we are working on, important thing that my team is focused on is, as you saw when I show you expansion plan, we turn off rawhide on December 31st, 2029, and boom, the 700 megawatts renewables show up the next day. That's an output from the model. That's what the model says. The most economical is you retire a generation and build one. But in reality, it takes a long time to build these generation, and that's what we are going to be refining our plan, looking at basically today, based on today's cost, it's cheaper for us to run our coal units because the cost of generation is about $16, $17 a megawatt hour, and it's dispatchable. And renewable is north of $20, and so we are replacing $17 power with $20+ power, which is intermittent also today. So obviously, economically, it's the cost is higher, and our customers are having to pay. So we want to balance the experience we need and all the resources we need before 2030 with the rate increase we will have. Those are the optimizations that we'll be working on in the next 6 months to a year to come up with the revised expansion plan. But definitely you will see more resources coming sooner, which is of interest to this audience. So that was kind of a whirlwind tour of what we are doing these days, and what we plan to do in the next few weeks and months and probably years. So now I'm going to hand it over back to Pete and Pat to follow up with any questions.
Well, thanks, Masood. So I'm going to get to the questions. I know we have a lot, and I'm starting off from one of the original ones. Actually, really quickly, is it okay, Masood and Pat, if I share your presentation with the attendees?
Sure. Yes, please do.
Okay. We had a couple of those. So the first question is, would you consider biofueling the peakers at Rawhide? Would that be potentially a cheaper alternative than batteries?
Well, biofuel, I mean, we are going to look at some alternative fuels there and just see what the economics and what's possible with the existing generation we have at Rawhide, but we haven't started those studies yet, and we're really not sure what the results are going to show. It is something we're going to look at. I'm not sure about biofuels. Biodiesel, is potentially one of those things we could consider. But I think the verdict is still out, and we're still need to understand what that means to our existing generation capacity there.
Okay. What are examples of carrier technologies, other, i.e. storage, other than batteries? So other storage technologies that might be in the vision there.
Masood, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So for our resource planning purposes, we consider battery storage, lithium-ion battery storage. But before that, we did a study, and the study is available on our website. We looked at other storage technologies as well, which may have potential. The first one of them is a pump storage. That's technology today. 96% of the global's power storage capacity is pump storage. It's an old technology, proven. There are a lot of, I think about 50,000 megawatts of capacity in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So that has a great potential. We do not have any in our area, but if obviously we are a small entity, but if there was a sites to be developed, we have heard some developers looking at it. We will be very keen because it gives us much more flexibility than lithium-ion batteries. It takes a long time. It has its challenges, but certainly something we can look at that if it's available. The second technology that we kind of are keeping in our eyes on other electricity storage technologies which are not yet proven, like for example, there is a iron oxide. Pat, you and I talked about that. It slips my mind.
Yeah, I think it's iron air.
Iron air, yes, iron air. Basically, kind of a forced rusting technology where you put the energy to iron to rust, and then you de-rust it, and you release the energy. It's innovative concept, new concept, and something that we will definitely consider. Another thing that has been talked a lot, it's not a storage technology per se, but hydrogen. There's a lot of conversations about hydrogen, but a lot of challenges, a lot of problems, and the cost is being one of them, and technology being, the ability of the existing gas turbines or engines to burn it being another one of them. But Europe, there's a lot of activity happening in Europe, but that could be a viable non-carbon emitting resource that could provide the backup power where you can use the existing generation if the technology develops within the next decade or so.
I think I'd like to add is, there's a lot of research going on in this area of storage. I'm sure it's going to change a lot over the next 10 years or so. We want to make sure we don't jump in too early when costs are maybe a lot higher than they will be in a few years. Just like we did when we did wind and solar over the last 10 years. We could have done a lot more wind and solar at twice, 3 times what we're paying now for wind and solar. And if we would have done that, we would be in a lot different financial position, and we would be able to do less wind and solar today. And so we're kind of thinking that the battery technology might take that same track, where we might see prices come down 50% or more over the next 5 years. And so we're kind of also, we're going to do some stuff to make sure we understand it, to make sure we know how to control that technology, and make sure we can implement it when it's available. But we want to make sure we don't do it too soon, where maybe we can't do as much as we could do it a few years later. So that's one of the balances we're trying to make here.
Great. This is a little bit of a follow-up. I don't know if it was intentional, just surreptitiously, but The ARPA-E and DOE storage shot are both aiming for 5 cents a kilowatt hour by 2030. And, obviously that would be, a great thing to achieve. In terms of your modeling, have you incorporated costs of that nature or that information into any of your models yet?
No, not right now. We do see a declining cost of storage. So we have a generic storage where the cost is declining, but because being a small entity, we are only going to implement proven technologies. So while we show a sharp decline in our modeling, and I don't think we get to 5 cents, but it's still a little bit higher. But when it comes to implementation, obviously, we will only take, as Pat said, the proven technologies and kind of dollar cost average it over time.
Okay, next question here. What did you assume was the lifetime of the rice plant in your RARP, and what do you use to estimate the risk that these assets would become stranded due to future regulation? And how does that risk enter into your cost modeling?
Good question. So, as we showed you, based on today's projection, in 2030, if we were to do away with thermal resources, it's very, very expensive. So, in our optimization, the model picked up rice units. We use 20 years life cycle, and to make our our planning horizon was 2021 through 2040, but we assumed a 40-year life for these rice units, and they were providing backup service, which is very critical based on what we know today, will be very critical in the first part of the next decade. But if a better technology and economical technology becomes available, obviously at that time, their use will be much, much lower, and kind of they could be using different fuels, non-carbon emitting fuels, or totally be used as a rarely backup. For example, the gas turbines we have now, many times they run like a less than 40, 50 hours a year. Now, I mean, they're sitting there, they're fully capable of running much, much more, but these are backup resources. They are used rarely. They provide critical reliability needs, and these engines could be using those. If there is no alternative developed, they could be providing those critical backup and still be worth valuable.
If I could just expand on that, I mean, I think what Masood's saying is, if technology does come along that's a lot better, battery technology, yeah, they may become stranded down the road, in the purest economic standpoint. But also, our number one priority is reliability and making sure we can keep the lights on, once we retire our coal units. And so that's our, so maybe it becomes stranded in 2040, 2050, but at least we're keeping the lights on in 2030, which, to me is, Masood and I are going to lose our jobs if we don't keep the lights on. So we're going to make sure that the lights stay on, and we'll worry about the cost down the road if they become stranded.
Okay, RTO question. Isn't there an advantage of having all of the Colorado utilities in the same RTO, where right now it seems like everyone's zigging and zagging?
I think the simple answer on that is yes, it would be better. I mean, it's the bigger footprint we can get, I think the more diversity you get for that market. We'll see if we get there. I mean, I think, as you saw in Masood's chart on what our long-term options are, there really isn't that many at this point. Maybe something else will come along that grabs everyone's attention. But right now, SPP West is probably, if I was a betting person, that may be what I bet my money on, but I'm not. But I think we're kind of coalescing, but I don't know. I certainly am not going to, we've had a lot of starts and stops here for markets in the West. So, I'm hopeful that, but I'm a positive, optimistic person. So I'm hopeful we can get there over the next few years. But we've been thinking that for a lot of years here in the West.
Okay, another RTO follow-up. What makes you think that the partners in WEES, et cetera, will have excess power to share in the future?
Well, there is no guarantee that they will, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're making sure we have enough resources on our system, enough, as Masood's showing, enough wind, solar, batteries, and a little thermal resources to make sure we can reliably serve our load. So we don't know, and we certainly don't want to hang our hat that there's going to be excess resources to rely on. And so that's one of the reasons why the thermal resources are, in my view, is an extremely important piece of this IRP P2 plan.
So if I could add just one, as you said, it's not the excess power we want to rely on, it's the diversity of weather that will be the key. Will we have definitely there will be certain hours you can rely on, excess power when we need it, but not for as a matter of routine that we'll be relying on that power.
Great. IRP question, or resource diversification policy question. How is the work going on the 9 caveats in the resource diversification policy? Since there are no goals or metrics, it's hard to know where things stand on those.
Well, I mean, I think I think we're trying to make a lot of progress on the DER side. I mean, there's some technology improvements that also have to be made on the battery side that that we really don't have necessarily a lot of control over. To the extent we're just getting started in this path to 2030 of 100%. So, I mean, I think there's a long ways to go, but I also think there's I think there's going to be a lot of technology improvements over the next 5 years or so in this space. There's a lot of people putting a lot of resources into it. Every time I turn around, there's another story of Bill Gates investing in another company that's got some promising technology. So, I'm very optimistic that we're going to see a lot of change in this space over the next 5 or more years. And so, yeah, it may look like there's a lot of work to be done, but I think technology could really make those changes happen quickly.
Yeah, just to add, this is the 2020 IRP. Before 2030, we will have a couple of more IRPs, and as the technology evolves and new things come, we'll be incorporating them in our plans.
Great. A pretty straightforward question. What are the owner communities? I think they were on the map, but just to list them.
So we are owned by 4 municipal utilities: City of Fort Collins, City of Longmont, Loveland, and Estes Park. The municipal corporations are the distribution companies, and they jointly own us proportionately. Roughly half is Fort Collins, and 25% or 23% Loveland and Fort Collins, and a small percentage, depending based on the load, is the Estes Park.
So Longmont and Loveland are about the same size, approximately.
Okay. What changes do you see for the electric utility in the next 10 years, and are you ready?
Well, I'd say we're trying to get ready. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever, this industry is changing unbelievably fast. I've been in it for 30 plus years, and and every year it seems like it's moving faster. And so to be ready, to say you're going to be ready, I don't know if you can ever be ready, but it's coming if you're ready or not. So we will definitely do our best to be ready, is all I can say.
Yeah, I'll just add a little thing. The WAPA's requirement is for us to do the IRP every 5 years. And so we're not required to do any update, but as Pat said, things are changing so fast. We are already updating the plan we built 2 years ago, or a year ago. So,
and I think we've committed to do another IRP before, by in 24 for sure, by 2024. So, but like Masood says, we're always doing planning. You know, it's not like it's the only time we do a plan is with when the IRP is due. We're always looking at it and continuing to understand what's coming and what the impacts might be on our system.
Great. Next question here. With the residents being the new office, does this make demand response more important considering the commercial load is shifting to the home? And even if we do go back to office, I think a lot of people are going to remain home shore. So how do you see that?
Yeah, my view is everything's important. I mean, we're not going to be able to meet our goals unless everyone, you know, we get everyone to participate, commercial, residential, industrial. You know, we got to have a lot of load that becomes responsive. You know, and if that's going to be price responsive or if it's control responsive, you know, we're not sure exactly how that's going to work. But all is we got to get a lot of people engaged and start thinking about, you know, what we can do to get them to change their, you know, their usage profile so that we can minimize costs, but not only that, but we can accommodate more renewables on our system. And that's what's going to be, to me, that's important.
So in that regard, you know, the new load that is coming is, you know, electric transportation. There is some flexibility in there, we believe. The heating load that is going to come over the next, you know, 20 years or so coming from electric heating, when that may or may not be as flexible. So, but definitely to get to 100% without having a lot of backup, a lot of thermal backup, we will need to bank on that flexibility, because not only the supply, renewable supply, is not dispatchable.
Okay, next question. To help manage resources, any consideration of buying power and battery storage from residential customers in the future?
I think that's going to be another key component of the DER program. You know, us being able to access, you know, residential and commercial storage that they have. So yeah, that's another program that we need to think about developing and getting in place. It's always harder than it may seem. You know, it seems easy to control, yeah, just control these batteries, but you know, everyone has little different technology. They have different controls. The different, you know, Wi-Fi and security becomes more important now. And so it sounds easy, but I think we're finding it's going to take some time because we want to make sure we do it right and we do it in a way that we can capture and get as many customers to participate in those programs that we do develop. But yes, definitely a program we need to look at.
Okay, next question. There's a large disparity between the 4 member communities, the distribution utilities, regarding openness and ease of interconnecting with solar. Will PRPA begin asking for more DERs from the member community to meet the system need, or will it continue to be passive regarding DERs at the local level?
That gets a little more political than I'd like to get into. It's really each member can make their own decision on how they want to deal with rooftop solar. I do know, you know, from my perspective, I'll just give you my perspective on it. I mean, we can do storage or solar, large-scale solar projects with single trackers, so that we get more solar in the morning, more solar in the day, and then we can get it at a fairly attractive price. So, you know, to the extent that communities want to do promote rooftop solar, you know, we're certainly not going to stand in the way of that. But I can say right for a fact that we can do it pretty significantly cheaper than people who can build, you know, solar on their roofs. So, and we need less batteries if we do it because of those single trackers that we have. But like I said, that's a member decision, and you know, we really probably will not weigh in on what members want or don't want their customers and what they promote to their customers.
Okay, next question. It's actually, have you considered the pumped hydro? And I think, Masood, you addressed that if somebody's building something in the area, you guys would be considering it.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Are you looking at overproducing wind and solar and offering zero or below zero cost to customers, i.e. real-time pricing?
You saw Masood's numbers on P2 on what we're looking at. I mean, we're definitely going to be overbuilding solar and wind for our load. You know, and we'll be developing programs, you know, I'm sure to try to, you know, to use more of that solar so we don't just curtail it. I mean, obviously with PPAs that we've signed, if we curtail it, we're paying for it even if we don't get to use it. So, you know, we definitely have the incentive to create programs to use that wind and solar when it becomes available. So I'd say the answer is, you know, definitely yes.
I was going to say that triggered my mind to the old net zero carbon study where you really were overbuilding in that one, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and you know, we just the portfolio 3 we showed you is roughly 60% excess energy in that. So, but you saw the price curve also. We could be selling that for zero to customers, but we would have to pay the PPA price. So, and we're a nonprofit. We'll spread those costs to our customers.
And I only add is that if, you know, until storage costs come down significantly, it's going to be cheaper for us to overbuild solar and wind and build and do less storage. And then we need less storage as a result. And right now that's the cheap, you know, as Masood's model is showing, that's cheaper than building more storage at this point. Maybe that'll change.
You've said that we need to maintain thermal generation in order to be resilient to extreme weather events, yet our reliance on thermal generation is actually causing these events. What is PRPA's process for weighing sustainability concerns when they come into conflict with the affordability? Are there any specific situations where you would prioritize the sustainability or the low carbon scenario?
I want to, I mean, that's a good question. I'm glad someone asked that because I think it's really important just to point out the numbers that's in Masood, you know, in that study, in our IRP study. Yes, we need more thermal generation, we think, to maintain the reliability that we're accustomed to, but we're still reducing our emissions by 93%. So, I mean, we're reducing our CO2 emissions, you know, 93%. So we're going from 3 million, you know, million tons of carbon to 190,000 tons. So, I mean, yeah, we're adding a little more thermal, but that we're not running it very often because we got all this renewables on our system. And so I think it's really important that, you know, we still are making significant strides, greater strides than almost any other utility in the region or in the country. So, you know, I don't want to, you know, discount what they're saying and what people are saying and why we need to do more. And we are trying to do as much as we can, but we also want to make sure we keep the lights on because electricity is an essential service and people are really dependent on it. And as we've seen now with COVID and, you know, emergencies, you know, we need to make sure we have a reliable electric grid. People are more dependent on it than ever. And so, you know, we got to make sure we maintain that too.
All right, next question, and it kind of, well, are you prepared to drop, well, I think the answer to this would be no. Are you prepared to drop all thermal in 2029 without having replacement resources in place? I think you've answered that.
Masood and I want to keep our jobs. That's what I that. So
well, it's not that. I mean, we saw what happened in Texas. It's a life and death issue now, the reliance on electricity. So we definitely are reducing, but if we are not going to arbitrarily, nobody will make that arbitrarily drop thermal generation if there is no alternative. I mean, it's not feasible.
Sorry, I'm just scanning to see where we are in terms of total questions left. Next question here, we're back to batteries. Battery prices have fallen faster than predicted in your last IRP. How are you updating your forecasting process to match this price decline?
So we intend to use NREL issues, what they call ATB, Annual Technology Baseline, which they update all the cost of technologies every year. So as this year, this fall, when we update our resource plan, we'll be using the latest and the greatest numbers coming from them. They're reputable, they are third party, and so we think for planning purposes their numbers are the best. And then of course we will, if the very last item in the page, we said we might go to the market and ask for some numbers. If we were to build any battery resources, then that will be the real number, and we will use definitely that. That's exactly what we did for wind. When we did the IRP, we had prices, we had done the solicitation, and we knew the prices of wind was. It was probably $4 or $5 lower than what the consultant or third-party vendors, independent vendors were telling us, and we dropped those prices. That's what we in our IRP. So take the best price you have and then validate with the actual bidding numbers. If we have, that's the market for us.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely update the battery cost. We'll also be updating the solar and the wind costs as well on what the latest projections are there. For since our IRP, I mean, some of those costs I think have come up a little bit from what our projections were before on the wind and the solar side. So yeah, the batteries may come down, other up a little bit. We'll see how it runs through the model and see what the results are under the new pricing for the next IRP.
Comment, but this could be a question, is regarding putting some sort of cost estimate on the impact from particulate matter from the thermal plants, and I think this would be primarily be coal. Is that something that you incorporate? You could almost say social cost of carbon could be in this question as well. Is that something that would be you could foresee being incorporated in the model?
Pat, you want me to
You want to take the first? Yeah, I'm sorry, the first part.
Yeah, so in the current IRP, in our current planning, we are our third-party independent consultant has given us some carbon taxes. Their expected values, there will be some carbon tax starting 2025. It starts at a lower value and it goes up pretty quickly. So we are building some costs of carbon based on these carbon taxes. In the IRP, we did run a sensitivity with the social cost of carbon, which is really, really high. It's around $40 to $50 a ton. So if you add that cost, the model will tell you to retire all the coal plants today. And since alternate is not available this time immediately, overall cost impact, we have to see our rates, how much they go up. So social cost, we ran a sensitivity, but not in our base projection. We only had a carbon tax in our base projections.
Great. So great presentation. Have you done any analysis on how much more grid storage could result from electric school buses vehicle to grid storage?
Yeah, I can say we haven't done any really specific studies on it. We definitely we'll take a look at it. We would definitely consider working with school buses and trying to figure out if that's a viable technology. We're a little bit we're just not sure how much storage there really is in that technology, but it's something we would definitely look at and consider if that's something our members in our communities were interested in.
So this sort of builds on a previous comment, but have you looked at sort of liquid fuels as a storage technology, and I'm assuming that could be potentially a synthetic fuel, a renewable green hydrogen, or is that something that you guys are just waiting to, for things to evolve?
In the last,
we are looking at. We are looking at doing some studies, getting some consultants to help us to look to see if that is, a viable option for us to have green hydrogen, on storage and so forth, and what's that cost, and is it viable? So yeah, it's something we're looking at. We're definitely see that as an area that is getting a lot of interest, and we're looking to see if it has merit or not for us.
Okay, question on generation cost. Mr. Ahmad said wind cost $2 per megawatt hour, while coal cost was $1.9 per megawatt hour. I thought coal plants generate costs were greater than $4 per megawatt hour. What accounts for that difference?
Okay, so I think what I was trying to say, the cost of wind is north of $20 a megawatt hour. Maybe if I said $2, that was in error. And our operating cost, the variable operating cost, not the sunk cost, the fixed cost of coal is $15 to $18. So if you bring wind today, it's going to increase our operating cost because the fixed cost already we have to pay.
Yeah, just not everyone is a resource planner out there, and not everyone thinks of the things in dollars per megawatt hour. So at $20 megawatt hour is 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Just so people can do the math. So that's the variable cost that Masood's talking about. There's just the out of pocket to run the coal plant. Doesn't include the all of the salaries and the fixed costs of the capital that's there. In our case, most of our coal plants are pretty much paid off, and so there's not a lot of fixed costs for us. So we're mostly, we think in terms of variable costs on the coal plants, and how does that compare to the costs of the renewables? And as Masood said, the coal costs, typically the variable costs are a little less than what our renewables costs are on an incremental basis. But as we retire the coal plants, we'll save on all those salaries and fixed costs that are associated with maintenance and so forth that we don't have with renewables. So there are some offsetting things as well that we definitely take into account.
And isn't there kind of specificity to specific plants in terms of obviously how close you are to your sources and so on as well? Right. Let's see here. Just a comment. Being in the utility industry, I can honestly say similar sized utilities have not done as well to plan for the energy transition. So a little kudos for you. And here we go. VW and Ford will have their V2G as a standard on their EVs. Would you consider consumer-owned V2Gs as storage for the grid? And if so, what incentives could you offer?
Yeah, definitely will consider it. I guess I've always been a little bit reluctant that people are going to let us use their batteries and wear them down, a little bit. And so I've always, if a technology comes along, it's definitely something we will consider in developing a program for. And we'll need to price it accordingly to make sure we can get access to that resource if we find that that's the most cost-effective way for us to do storage on our system. So it'd be definitely part of our DER program if that becomes a viable option. Masood, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think fundamentally it'll come down to the reliability, availability. I mean, can we actually draw on that energy at 4 p.m. on hot afternoon? in July? Would people let us draw on there when they have to go home? Maybe on the car that is sitting in the garage, yes. But I think V2G technology is still evolving, and this V2G and other DER technologies, frankly, we look to our owner communities because they're closer to the customers. So some of the pilots we will run with them would be kind of they lead, and we work with them on those if the technology is available.
It's not just at 4 o'clock. I mean, it's going to be times when anytime the renewables start dropping off, as you saw Masood's graphs, we see wind drop off in the afternoon a lot. We see, obviously solar's dropping off at 5 or 6 o'clock. We see clouds coming through on a very regular basis at 3 in the afternoon. That reduces our solar output. So we have a steady drop in solar, typically from 3 in the afternoon until the sun goes down. So you would think it would, so we see that cloud cover come in. So that's when we need that battery technology, and our customers, and we need it on a regular basis. It's not just a few times a year. We're going to need that battery capability on a weekly basis, on a regular basis. We're going to need access to that storage capability, and that's what we're going to be looking for in developing programs for over the next few years.
Okay, I got a big question here. Can you describe how the utility controls, and to what degree does the utility have control over consumer invested DER systems? Reason for the question is if ABC company invests in a DER, for example, solar, a natural gas generator, or a battery, sized to cover their own peak local demand and for the benefit of resiliency if our grid goes down, it does not seem that it would be reasonable for the consumer to oversize their DER in order for the utility to tap into the DER storage and deplete the power. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll through this. The power capacity reserve of the client-owned DER. How does the client recover cost investment of the lost battery cycles, battery life, if the utility uses that battery to support the grid? So it kind of backed right into some of what you were just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down, if we can do it, for whatever cost, I mean, and if someone else can do it for that price or less, I mean, why wouldn't we go with that customer and buy it from the customer? I mean, I've always thought we should, if our customers have some excess they don't need at certain times, we should, we would prefer to buy from our customers and, pay our customers. We would prefer to do that over putting steel in the ground and building something. If we can pay our customers, I mean, that to me, that makes a lot of sense. But it's got to work for the customer, and it's got to be the least cost option for Platte River too, to make it work.
Okay. Will PRPA be considering including labor standards or local hire requirements in upcoming projects being proposed, since there doesn't seem to be any requirements in the IRP itself?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if we've, obviously we're going to go with vendors that, are very established vendors. I mean, I guess we haven't probably incorporated a lot of that into our RFP process in the past. That's something we could take a look at though, and I'll take that back and see if that's something we should consider.
How does demand response and generation capacity become integrated together in the IRP DER approaches?
I think in the current IRP, the one we talked about, we didn't have a lot of demand response programs because currently we have probably less than a megawatt of demand response. Some of our utilities do. We didn't build that. Now we have distributed solar, which is 20 megawatt, and we know it's going to increase. So in our IRP, we build that up to 100 megawatt by 2030. So it'll go from the current level of 20 to the demand response is so minuscule that we didn't build. Now, as we implement the DER strategy, before, we will have a better idea how much is the potential for that, and over time how it is expected to grow. So I'm thinking in the next IRP, definitely we will have some demand response which will offset the generation needed from the supply side resources.
Okay. Have you explored any ways to crowdfund community solar to lower the price for the utility to build it?
We have not. I mean, it's not that we're not against it. We're just, we look at what we can do solar at, and if our members still want to do other projects and want to do crowdsourcing or however they want to do their programs, they certainly have the right to do that.
Okay, question on hydrogen. Isn't hydrogen expensive, dirty, and inefficient in production? Also, almost all hydrogen, 90 to 95%, is produced from natural gas. Economics and clean energy benefits are debatable.
Yeah, I think if we did hydrogen, we would want to make sure it was green hydrogen, where you're going to use an electrolyzer to convert the excess electricity into hydrogen. I know that's not very efficient, but I think you convert about, it's a 50% conversion rate to hydrogen, and then you're turning it back into you're definitely losing a lot of efficiency by doing it, but you want to do it because you got excess electricity on the grid, and that's why you would do it. So we would not want to convert natural gas into hydrogen. Maybe we would as a demonstration to know that our turbines can burn that hydrogen, but that would not be a long-term viable option for us. There's more economical ways to just convert that natural gas into electricity would be much more efficient.
Okay. There are a number of water projects under consideration locally that will require a lot of electricity for pumping, but may also present opportunities for pumped hydro storage. The Glade Reservoir, Greeley's Terry Bison Ranch, Aquifer Water and Source and Storage. Is PRPA looking to partner with any of these for energy storage or optimum load scheduling?
I mean, we definitely will look at any pumped hydro options. I think for the economics to work, I think you need like 1,500 feet of elevation differences between the different pooling areas. So, I mean, we found that most of those projects, the economics probably don't work, but we definitely would partner with anyone and take a look at the economics to see if there's anything viable. Because we do think that's really good long-term storage, and it's probably the most economical long-term storage. We just think it's hard to get that permitted and hard to get it built. But we definitely will look at it.
Okay, can you rank the dirtiness of, I think it's the following: coal-fired power plants, oil-fired power plants, and diesel engine plants?
Well, and I mean, I would, for Masood talks, I would just say that, I mean, they have their own issues. I mean, the nice part about the diesel plants and maybe the oil plants is you can run them for a very short period of time and follow your renewables with it. So you would produce a lot less emissions than you will a coal plant, who has to be online 24/7 and has to be at minimum because it takes 2 days to get it online and get it back up to full output. And so you have to keep them online a lot. So, I mean, I think they're really different, used for different purposes. And so we need to make sure, yeah, they're pollute. Some of them are polluting. They all pollute. But the diesel units, I mean, we can just run, if we overbuild our renewables, we can just run. We won't have to run them very often. And when we do, we maybe only have to run them for a few hours. And so they'll pollute a lot less than some of the other more base load units. Masood, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, yeah, I think you said it well. the dirtiness is, really depends on the type of fuel you use and the type of dirtiness you're measuring. For example, CO2 is one. In terms of CO2, coal and oil are the same. In terms of particulate matter, coal is more than oil and diesel. In terms of sulfur, it really depends on how, what is the sulfur content in the oil or coal. So it varies by the type of fuel and the type of technology. But fundamentally, oil-fired plants in the US are pretty much extinct. It's diesel, which is really truly a backup run for a short period of time, versus coal, which is run as base load, and they're dying over time. I think as a country, we've retired probably more than 100,000 megawatt of coal in the last 10 years. The economics are not there for them, and the environmental pressures are making them extinct.
Okay, a follow-up on the utility control of DERs. It seems that having utility-controlled client-owned DER is prohibitive and may cause clients not to invest in DER. You think that would be a dissuasion?
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, who owns what? I mean, you're saying customers?
I think it's, when the utility has the ability to control a client's distributed energy resource, would that be a disincentive for the client, the private owner, to not bother investing in the DER?
Yeah, and I think every customer is going to be unique and will have to make its own decision on if that's appropriate for them. I mean, I'm hopeful our programs will give a whole range of, control options. Maybe one extreme is the utility, we can control it to use it when we need it most. Maybe there's a sharing of that control. Maybe there's, maybe the customer only makes it available when it's convenient for them. We're not sure exactly how that's all going to play out. We just know we need to be as flexible as possible because we need as many DERs on our system that can be flexible and follow our renewables if we're going to have any chance of meeting the 100% carbon free by 2030.
Okay, would you as a utility be able to provide financial incentives for businesses in your service area to build microgrids to bolster grid reliability?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a member distribution issue more than it's a Platte River issue. So I would probably defer to our members somewhat. Our goal at Platte River is to provide reliable service to everyone. And I know the microgrids can provide very high level of reliability to certain customers. And I certainly don't want to, and there may be situations where they benefit from do that, if that makes sense. I'm not sure, I'm sure we would look at it and to the extent we get value, and we would partner in that potentially. But ultimately, I think it's a reliability issue that probably falls more on the member systems more than Platte River.
Okay. I'm trying to get clarification on a couple of of one of these questions here. So the comment was LA was able to procure a solar plus storage at 3 cents a kilowatt hour. What are you experiencing in terms of the pricing you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're subject to confidentiality on a lot of our pricing, but I mean, we can say that, we're seeing, we're in the same range. Anything that's been public out there for costs, I mean, that's, I think generally we've been seeing prices in that same range.
Okay, hold on one second here. Okay. Tony Seba says modelers are underestimating future fossil fuel electricity costs because capacity factors are going down as those resources are being replaced with renewables. How are you taking that into account with your cost projections?
I think that's a good point. But in our case, we have our assets are existing thermal assets have depreciated already pretty much, and we retired coal plant and all of its costs go away. And our existing gas turbines, they are also, they will be 30 years plus old by the time we enter 2030, and they are depreciated. Now the new RICE unit we are not measuring their cost on a dollars per megawatt hour basis, rather as a fixed capacity payment. So their full cost is considered in our analysis as part of total portfolio cost. So we are not underestimating. The dispatch could go down, but our total cost curve that you saw had the full cost of owning those new thermal generation assets.
I mean, so basically, I think what Masood's saying is we have a fixed cost that don't change no matter what the dispatch is. We could dispatch them, 0 times, and we would, still have to cover all those fixed costs. So we've included that in our models, and then we have the variable operating costs as well in our models. So I think we capture it. So if we're dispatching less, he's right. You're right. The per unit costs go skyrocket, and our resources show that. So I think we capture that in our models.
Okay. What can community members of the 4 owner communities do to support PRPA's progress towards the 100% non-carbon goal?
I think the DER strategy is going to be one where we work together to try to meet our goals. I think we need more collaboration. Platte River is, looking at it from a system standpoint, and I think we will definitely be looking to be just making sure we're dispatching resources, DERs, for the benefit of the system. And so, I think that's where the members are going to have to help us, making sure that we're all doing this for the benefit of the system, and we don't have members, doing things, that are maybe in their interests. And so we're definitely going to need the support from the members there, DERs. Masood, anything else I'm missing?
No, I think you said it well. More engaged and informed customers are what we need. And, like in our IRP, 93%, 94% decarbonization plans is one of the most aggressive in the country for our size utilities. And, they need to help us reach there. We'll definitely want to go to 100%. That's our goal, that's our strategy. But the cost of that is prohibitive at this time. And so together we will get there, but I think 93% is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that's a really good start. I'm sure we're going to have to get more price sensitive, be able to put out prices and make sure, customers and members are reacting to those prices, and we'll have to figure out ways to get customers engaged in doing that. It's going to be a challenge, and don't get me wrong. If this was an easy lift, all the utilities would be doing it, and no one's really figured out how to do this optimally. And I think it's going to be a learning curve, and we'll learn together, and we'll make some mistakes, but we'll figure it out, and we'll try to improve.
Great. Well, shifting gears here, is there any consideration of nuclear?
Masood, you got that one?
So before the IRP, we did a technology assessment where we looked at all the generation technologies that are suitable for our size, for our location. Nuclear was one of them. And for our size and for the time horizon we were looking, and the technology risk that as a small entity we are willing to take, nuclear didn't pass the past the muster, and we didn't consider it. Now, since last 2 years, there has been a lot of talk about small modular nuclear, and if that technology grows, takes the commercial, kind of base, commercially proven, we definitely will consider, because we have a stated policy 100% it's not 100% renewable, it's 100% non-carbon. So nuclear will fit perfectly. It's base load, it provides stability, and to the extent it provides some flexibility, it will great complement. But the economics have to work, and the commercial risk has to make sense for us.
Okay, next question here. Lazard publishes their energy costs, as you know. Where are your coal and renewable costs within the ranges published by Lazard? And there's a second question from the same person, so I'm going to kind of lump these together. And can you restate your cost comparisons and levelize cost of energy as they do in the, I think Lazard is all under LCOE, correct?
Yeah. So when we look at out of the Lazard, the only relevant comparison would be renewables, LCOE, and peaking capacity LCOE. So the coal we have is already sunk. So the fixed costs don't get into the equation. We count those in our costs, but they are not part of the decision making process. If based on pure economics, our the first portfolio, business as usual, if there is no policy driver, is the cheapest path, and it tells us to keep running our coal units even based on today's cost. It does not forces us to retire. So the Lazard numbers we looked at, I think we didn't do a specific comparison with the Lazard, but the numbers we are using based on NREL and calibrated with our own experience are the best numbers we could use for our analysis, and we are very comfortable with those, and they fall very closely within the values of Lazard.
Okay. Next question here on solar. You said solar at big scale with PPAs is cheapest, but did you consider that all the tax credit, RECs, depreciation, and sales revenue goes to outside investors and not to the local economy? Shouldn't we favor locally owned resources to capture those revenues, which would be magnified by the local economic multiplier?
Yeah. Not sure I want to, I'm not sure we can get into all the details of the pluses and minuses. I think there's pluses and minuses on both sides. And so I think we'll just leave it for maybe another presentation. We can get into that. I think that's another hour-long discussion about what are the pluses and minuses. I understand that side of the argument. I also know that the more rooftop, if you take the rooftop solar and go to the extreme, they may not be paying for a lot of the distribution system that's going to be needed to maintain reliability and make sure that everyone can run conditioners when it gets hot out as well. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, I'm sorry, this is a follow-up question, so okay. So this is going back to that, the cost per megawatt hour of wind versus coal. So my question comes not knowing the difference between the fixed and variable costs for wind versus coal, and what costs are considered fixed and what are more variable. I'm sorry, it's tough in the little view pane to see the whole thing. Oh, sorry, I think that was just a comment. I'm going to go ahead and skip over that then. What was learned from the Fort Zed DOE renewable distributed systems integration that can be applied to today and the DER strategy going forward?
I'm not sure I'm familiar. Masood, are you?
No, can you say that again? Whose?
It was the Fort Zed, the Zero Energy District. I think it happened within, I think it was primarily Fort Collins Utilities involved. I'm not sure. John Bleem would probably be pretty familiar. I don't know if John's on the, wants to chime in on that. But it was, I believe it was run at the, over at the powerhouse, I think was a big part of it. And their resources were dialed into that.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so we'll move on from that. Doesn't real-time pricing fix the incentives for customers to participate?
I mean, I think there's definitely it's a piece of the puzzle to help us solve this issue. Where I think pricing can be a pretty significant incentive to participate or not participate. I don't know if it's going to be the entire solution. I don't think it can be the entire solution because I'm not sure prices with all these renewables coming on the system. We're seeing zero prices, negative prices, and we're going to see then when thermal units are on, we're going to see some positive pricing. But I don't know if it's going to be enough pricing, high enough pricing that will incent everything that needs to be done, just using price alone. So I think that's going to be a combination of pricing as well as direct control, as well as just other incentives that the members or Platte River may create to get the behavior we want. I mean, like we're seeing the LMP pricing most days, 2 cents a kilowatt hour, 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe $0 when the wind is really heavy. I mean, that's not a lot of, price, not a lot of price differential to really drive a lot of big projects, expensive projects. So I think there's going to be some of that, but I think it's going to be other programs too that the members in Platte River develops to get as much control as we need out there on the system.
Okay, last question, I think, if somebody else chimes in. Has the utility looked into wastewater treatment plants being used as a hydropower plant, if nothing else, to offset the energy the treatment plants use?
I mean, in terms of wastewater treatment, I think there's a digester component of it that wastewater plants are being used to create, kind of a biofuel to run generators. There's definitely some of that out there. I think the cost of that has been very expensive, and I don't know if it's certainly not competitive with wind and solar today. That cost may come down as technology improves, but it's something we'll keep an eye on. But in terms of, as like a pump storage thing, I don't think, like I said, I think you need a significant deviation from the high elevation and low elevation to make the economics work. And I don't think we see that for any of the, the wastewater treatment facilities, that at least not that I'm familiar with. So, Masood, do you want to add anything to the last question?
No, I think you said it right. I mean, for hydro to work, there has to be a certain head, and I don't think, I've not heard of any hydro plant off the wastewater.
No, we're not. And I have heard some of the digester projects.
Yeah.
8 cents, 9
That's
cents.
methane. That's gas-fired thermal. It's not
right.
hydro. Yeah.
I think, didn't Fort Collins Utilities put in thought it was like 50 kilowatt or on their inlet valve out of Horsetooth into the drinking water treatment plant? I thought they did something like that.
Yeah.
They may have.
That could be. I mean, there may be some low flow kind of technology out there that it's pretty small, and 50 kilowatts it'd be a lot of projects, and it'd take quite a bit of work to build that up into something of significant size. But yeah, you're right. There may be some projects out there like that. I'm not aware of it though.
If anything, it's just lowering the energy demand of that water plant, that drinking water plant, I would suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we got one more here. The biggest power plant in the world, or biggest power plants in the world, over 10 gigawatts each, are 100% renewable virtual power plants, and all assets are customer-owned DERs. Will you look at these types of systems in the EU and UK to see how that could work for you if the community built all based on your needs?
Yeah, I've read a fair amount on virtual power plants. I think there's people talk about it, but I think everyone has a different definition of what a virtual power plant is and exactly what it is. I think, are they on demand? Is it, I think they're just like they're DERs that are aggregated. And to the extent the customers are willing to provide control, give you control, yeah, there's definitely some resources there. There's definitely some potential. I'm just not sure, how much it is, or if it's as virtual and on demand as people think it is. Because I think it's just aggregated DER resources or even behind the meter generation, diesel generation that can come on to reduce someone's load, type stuff. So I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done. I certainly need to understand it better. We're certainly willing to consider anything to help us meet our goals. So we're certainly not precluding anything, but I would definitely need to understand it better. And like, I think there's a lot of different definitions out there of virtual power plants, and I think we just need to do some more research on our end.
Okay, sounds great. Well, if no more questions, I think we're just about up against our time limit here. We'll end just a little bit early, but want to thank everyone again for joining us, and I want to thank Masood and Pat for taking a lot of some tough and good questions and updating us on where you are in the progress towards the goal. And I know we'll have you back in the future as things evolve and develop.
We appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions and to present here tonight. So thank you.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good evening.
All right. Bye-bye.